Okay, so this is our presentation on OpenAPI. So OpenAPI description. So OpenAPI is a freely shared computer application that aims to provide programmers with the ability to access data and functionality without limitations or restrictions.
And so APIs in general are treated as unbreakable contracts in which they're meant to be used in which both parties are abiding to a certain set of rules. And so they're at their most useful when both machines and humans can read them clearly and understand them. And so a machine-read API description file, as detailed in OpenAPI, is useful because it allows the programmer to access the benefits of OpenAPI, like description validation, linting, data validation, documentation generation, code generation, graphical editors, mock servers, and security analysis. And so OpenAPI allows this level of automation due to the description file being machine readable.
Right, so what is the OpenAPI specifications? So the OpenAPI specifications, or OAS for short, defines a standard language agnostic interface which allows humans and computers to access and understand the implications of an API without needing to understand the code that went into it. When implemented properly, a consumer can easily interact with the API with minimal implementation logic. So here's sort of like a description of the OAS and the API lifestyle. So obviously there's a lot of different routes an API can take, but generally the API starts off in the requirements stage where the users plan out what the API should do for the consumers and what the API needs to do to support a holistic view of the product features. Typically, you should start creating rough sketches of the design for the API. So the next step is a design step where you take the requirements specified in the previous step and turn it into something tangible, so like something like physical. And next you have development. So development is where you take the design generated and create an implementation of your design in software. So this is where you actually code it up. And then next you have configure. So in configure, you basically want to configure your API to protect it from outside threats, and overall you just want to make it more secure. And you also have testing. So testing is where you test your API using real-world situations to make sure that it's suitable for deployment and will actually work. And then finally you can deploy. So as you can see in the picture on the left, that's kind of a rough idea of what the typical life cycle looks like.
Yeah, so OpenAPI descriptions are a big part of OpenAPI, and they're the root of what makes it useful. And they're machine-readable text documents that can be written in JSON, YAML, or both, given that YAML is a superset of JSON. So OADs are JSON objects that include the fields required for OpenAPI specification, and those fields, at the bare minimum that they contain, are OpenAPI info and any endpoint fields, which is typically paths, components, or webhooks. The OpenAPI field describes a version of the OAS. The info field contains general API information, with the general bare necessity being the title and version. And the paths object describes the endpoints of the API and possible responses that can arise. So the paths object, which is accessed through the paths field in the OpenAPI object, contains all the possible API endpoints. So within the paths object, there's the operation object, the responses object, and the response, which also contains additional information that is generally necessary for the API to function. So the operation object contains the summary, description, parameters, and responses for an operation accessible through paths. So basically gives the information about the operation. And then the responses contains the HTTP response code, whether that be an error or a success. And the response object within the responses provides a description of either why the error or success has occurred.
That's all. Thank you.